Essentially, on the agenda today, I wanted to talk about three things: people, processes, and ecosystems, in that order. That's the first piece of advice I would give, and I'm giving today, to leaders in different types of organizations about what they need to do to start creating and leading their content operations globally. Talk about people first, processes and ecosystem, technology at the end. The purpose is not to ignore any of these topics, but it's actually to take it in the right order so that you have defined your business objectives and that you get the talent, you establish the processes, and eventually you build the right ecosystem or the right technology for what you need to do. So I have a few points today. I will try to cover them as much as possible in a concise way, because each of them could generate a number of discussions. But obviously it will be all around agility. You will see I'll talk about agility quite a lot. Effectiveness, more than quality, and I will explain why in a minute. And obviously I will talk about elevating localization or globalization in different types of organizations. So how to make sure that a localization team is not just a team flying around, but which is more integrated in content supply chains and eventually in the company, in the business. Because I've seen in most companies I've worked for, I've seen people being frustrated about called at the last minute, getting a lot of work to do for yesterday, and so on. So I think that this is a sort of pain that is shared by many people. And my typical advice is really to tell those people, try to elevate your team in the content operations team, which many companies have, even startups have that, but also to amplify the value that you are creating, that you are not just there to put a piece of text into another language. And I'll get back to that in a minute. But first of all, when I talk about growing at scale, I mean scaling hard and scaling smart. Scaling hard is to make really big jumps, like, my company or my team needs 20 more people, I need more resources, etc. But essentially, making big leaps has a number of downsides. I prefer baby steps. We talked about baby steps before. This is not the same type of baby steps. But typically, when we talk about growing content operations at scale, my experience tells me that it's much better really to do it step by step and make sure that, instead of scaling hard with a number of people that are added to the organization, to really scale smart, to talk about capacity and capabilities. Really to hire less people maybe, but to do more with less people. Because depending on the skills that those people have, depending on their background, sometimes they can do more than just 50 people that would be hired just for one thing. So the importance is not just to scale that way, but also if you have to downsize your organization, it's easier to fall back from one baby steps rather than just to fall back from the whole ladder. So my lesson is not just to scale it that way, but also if you, like it happens now, in the industry there are many layoffs, it's actually to make a step back, but a baby step back, and not a whole big step back. So it goes both ways. So hard and smart are two things that must be combined, always. If I look now at the challenge, because we talked about the challenges a lot of times, I think that in global content operations, and you can put that in the localization world as well, it's very obvious that there are many things that needs to be covered. Many things, not just language, cultural things, functional requirements. That's why for me, for instance, localization is much more about, total language effectiveness, which includes, of course, linguistic conventions, but also cultural requirements, functional requirements. Because sometimes I've seen some great applications being localized properly in the right language with the right cultural references, but those applications didn't work. So how you invest sometimes millions in localization of an application, but if the application doesn't work properly, then, what else? It's just, you're just stuck. So typically here, what I call the content wall, and I've seen that many, many times when I was an employee when I was a director of operations, but also now when I'm a consultant, I see that a number of people, including leaders, sometimes, very senior leaders are stuck because they see all these things coming to play and they don't really know how to tackle that. They're just facing a wall. So my advice is actually to maximize capacity and capabilities. So the purpose here is, once there is a decision about the content solution leader or the content leadership, call it what you want, is to have readiness and effectiveness working together. We talked about internationalization. I use the word readiness, which I think is more appropriate because in this readiness bucket, in my previous organizations, I included UX, I included business analysis, knowledge management, which are even more important today that human beings have to work with machine. So these are new roles that are going to be very important in the future, and they're already important now, in my opinion. But these roles in business analysis and knowledge management are critical. Content design, development and engineering, and testing QA. These are really the key roles. It's, you can have more, but for me, this is the sort of baseline in many organizations, regardless of the size. And in content effectiveness, then I built my teams based on these roles. Again, some roles are related to the customers, some roles are more related to internal operations. The purpose is not only to make those people work together, but actually is to cover much of the content supply chain. Because then, with this type of team or this type of organization, I've been able to really elevate them in the rest of the business. Because it was easier to justify, to explain, and to measure what my team was doing. So, the purpose is really to offer a number of services and a number of a number of types of support to make sure that global content is truly global and it's truly comprehensive. And I'll get back to that in a minute. So capacity and capabilities have to work together again, not just capacity and not just capabilities. Because I've seen that many times and I still see that now. It's amazing. Some people just realize that, yeah, I need 20 more people, 20 more project managers. And I ask them, why? Do you have, the details for each of them? We'll see later. I need 20 more people. Yeah, okay. You can try. I wouldn't take it like that. But okay, that's my personal advice. Something else that really I really enjoyed and I would recommend in many ways is to work in an agile way. So I was able to build tribes based on chapters, based on squads, nothing new because probably there are many companies using the same model, which used to be called the Spotify model, but now we are 10 years later. The purpose here is, again, to mix or to combine capacity with capabilities so that each new recruit could be really included in a tribe and could be really also part of a squad and a chapter based on skills, and again, based on capabilities overall, but based on skills, based on expertise, based on background, very important. And this way of working is not just more flexible in terms of day-to-day operations, but in my view and in my experience, it's also easier to have the right team at the right scale. Growing or downsizing, depending on how you play with it. So the fact that it is more flexible, it's also a way to give people sometimes more responsibilities and a job that is more interesting, more exciting than just being a project manager, receiving files, sending files, or getting the complaint from the client or whatever. So there is a way also to make the team humanly more interesting and more flexible and more agile in general. So when I talk about effectiveness, and when I say that we should all drive effectiveness at scale, I mean that the processes, the workflows, have to be really designed to be modular, to be really adaptable to the type of content, to the type of market, to the type of audience, so that it's not something that is too set in stone, that is really something that can be used as building blocks in processes. So here I put a few examples, so I'm going to, yeah, which is of course, you know, the basic steps of localization, which comes, well, or content operations, but including localization. So when there is a request, when there is a sprint, when there is a story, it starts with the creation of the content and it ends at the delivery. But again, here, sometimes, like in life science, for instance, you have many more steps than that. So probably people in the life science industry, they know that it's much more complicated than that, just because it's regulated. And you need, of course, not just one QA, but you need multiple QAs. So the point is just to start building the blocks that are going to be flexible enough to be used like that, or to be combined with other blocks. So that it becomes also truly agile, and that content operations can be adapted to everything that you do in your business. Because we all have different types of content, we all have different types of customers. So it's really, really important to, you know, start small, probably, yeah, you know, but be able and be ready to do big. And that's really the point of agility for me in content operations, is really to be able to, you know, grow at scale again, but just to be at scale at the right time with the right people. Something that is really, really close to my heart is how to elevate localization, or in general, global content operations in organizations. I know it's not possible to do what I'm going to say now in every type of business, but I think the purpose should be the same for every type of organization, which is to make sure that localization is included in global content supply chains, and that the value is amplified, that the value is not just created, but that the value is also measured, or captured, measured, and increased. Many localization teams start with the status of being a business service. I'm a localization team manager, I'm waiting for the content to arrive so that my team can translate it into 6, 10, 20 different languages. Okay, nice, but not very, how to say that? Sometimes in organizations, this is seen as a very low profile type of role, very low, very sort of, very transactional way. I send you files, send them back to me in different languages. That's a business service. And that's where many people in the localization industry complain, because they say, oh, my team is always called at the last minute, my team is not recognized, my team is treated like, you know, I would say, you know, content pushers and you know, whatever. And the problem is also that, from an operations perspective, is that it is a cost driver in many organizations. So people say, well, localization, there is a cost, you know, it's not fast and it's very expensive. So frustration is really all over the place. The frustration is in the localization team, but it's also in the rest of the organization, because, you know, it's a cost driver. Many people don't see the value immediately. So what I did and what I recommend now to do is really to move to a business enabler status, which is better than the business service, because it's still a cost, but it's a cost center. It's not a cost driver anymore. So it becomes more engaged, it becomes more embedded in the rest of the organization. So the purpose here is really to start being recognized, to create value. It's actually a way to you know, be considered as more than just a transactional team, enabling the business to run internationally. The icing on the cake and the ultimate goal is also always to be a business partner. That's what I was able to do in 2 companies when I worked as a director of operations, is really to be able to be part of this value chain that every content is supposed to create. And this is when localization becomes a profit driver. Because people say, if we don't have localization, there is no business internationally. Less revenue, less margins. Ooh, this is shocking for any senior leadership team. So, operationally, it changes a lot as well, because in the beginning, it's very low level, and at the end, it becomes more tactical and strategic. Very important to move, and the reason for moving or trying to move in this direction is to do this, is to really taking globalization or global content operations to the next level by increasing effectiveness and value, but also to be able to measure, track, measure, and improve performance. And this is not just about production and productivity KPIs like volumes, millions of words, etc. It's about customer experience metrics like, fluency, accuracy, consistency. I have a list of 15 CX KPIs that I'm using now, and I think that at least 5 of them should be really part of any strategy. So here, the purpose is not just to be recognized in a better way, but it's also to make sure that whatever is done in localization or in general in global content operations gets measured properly and not just as a cost, but also as a profit driver. I'm not going to talk too much about this one. I included it because hopefully you will get a copy of this presentation at the end. But, turning operations into priorities, this was very important to me because when I had this leadership of content operations and localization, I had to justify it. And a number of ways to justify it can be related, of course, to the business, but I use this SMART concept of making it specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Because again, moving into this direction is a way to grow the business and is a way to create some, new revenue streams. So this is more for information. This is the result of many years, so don't get me wrong. I didn't do that overnight, so it's really something that can take a lot of time, specifically in enterprise environments. But now that I'm working with some startups and scale-ups, I realize that they're very interested because they know that they want to grow, so they want to know how an enterprise would do the same thing. So that if they grow from a startup to a scale-up, from a scale-up to an enterprise, how they should get ready to handle their content operations accordingly. I talked about the people, the processes, and this is now the ecosystem. This is for me really important to make sure that we don't talk anymore about CMS, TMS, or sometimes different TMSs, or different CMSs, or different CAD tools. The purpose is really to make sure that, again, from a readiness and from an effectiveness perspective, that the ecosystem is really well connected so that the people using this ecosystem can also work together effectively. This is even more important today than, for instance, if I take one component of the ecosystem, which is machine translation, the purpose is to keep human in the loop. If you want to keep human in the loop, of course, in an effective way, it will be very important, first of all, to have the translation memory in the ecosystem, but also to be able to, keep the human in the loop in a way to deliver content effectiveness. So people working in or with this ecosystem will be in a better position to work with the machine intelligence and to deliver their own intelligence to create the content effectiveness. So it was very important for me in the past to have more than just a CAD tool or multiple CAD tools, but it was even more important to really make sure, now that is even more important to really make sure that there is an ecosystem in place so that there is not just a myriad of different tools that are available to people. And again, very quickly, because I know this is something that I have to mention because we talked a lot about data, but if I look about how data should be managed, I use the concept of liquid data. This is something that I learned when I was working at Nielsen, data science company. And one day I attended a presentation about liquid data, and he said, what is this now, didn't know that maybe it's some sort of data about liquids. No, I was wrong. It's actually a way to combine data, which is not based on blocks of data, but which is to extract data from different blocks and to create a story, to create a dashboard. And I use this concept in my team, because I found it quite interesting, to really deliver, of course, my own data, because I needed to deliver my data, but to start with the requirements, to see what sort of data was coming from the content itself, then to adapt localization, globalization, operations accordingly, and finally to really get all these small pieces of data together to create a dashboard and to demonstrate that the goals were met by localization data. So instead of putting just blocks of data that I could have extracted myself. So Liquid is really a way to put it simply, but to put data in a way that is, how to say that, more like a storytelling thing. And I found it very interesting. Data scientists, they love this concept of data or liquid data, but I use it for my own purpose. And that's it for me today, so I'm happy to take any question. Thank you very much.